to give you a purpose in life. It wants to tell you that all that's around you is actually has meaning. What's right, what's wrong, science isn't going to tell you that. And that's why those 20% of the Royal Society fellows, they may be in a minority, but they're still a significant minority. And they can still do good science while keeping their religious beliefs. Okay, so I don't know what order to take the questions. Yeah.
Thank you for a very difficult for your battle for sanity in Pakistan as well. But I just wanted to ask you, I agree with you speaking about the need to change the philosophical outlook. But you also touched on the relationship between politics and science flourishing. The satellite flourished under that hatred, like the Caliph Mahmud. That side of Islam flourished under the British. You had like a close Fazlur Rahman, another modernist, flourishing under Ayub Khan, and so on. So it's all very well to say we have to change the philosophical outlook, but is it really possible? What about the conditions in which that kind of philosophical outlook can thrive? I don't just mean just material wealth or whatever, because Saudi Arabia has material wealth, and that's part of the problem. But I mean more a sense of independence, the dignity, the economic and social conditions. How can we address that? And is it really too optimistic to expect the philosophical outlook of Muslims to change without addressing the social and material conditions first?
I don't have a clear answer to that, but I can look at history and see that there have been periods, that there have been periods of fluctuation. If you look towards the time on the subcontinent when Sayyid Ahmad Khan was around, well, there was very little science among Muslims, and he had to fight a very difficult battle in order to get basic scientific rationality across to a few people. But then comes partition, creation of Pakistan. You see that the pursuit of science in the subcontinent as a whole, and Pakistan in particular, increases. It is in a positive direction. And I'd say pretty much for the Muslim world as a whole. The 1950s, until the 1960s, I'd say, there was a very positive view of science as being a way in which to approach the problems of society, but also the public understanding of science, acceptance of science rather, was in generally a positive direction. And those were times when the Muslim world had a majority of secular leaders. In Iran you had Mossadegh, in Indonesia you had Sukarno, in the Middle East you had Jamal Abdel Nasser, in Pakistan of course we had Jinnah, a secular man, Algeria you had Ben Bella and so forth. There were no fundamentalists at that time. It's when either the governments collapsed of their own accord through corruption or whatever, or they were displaced by imperialism, which actually took out Mossadegh, took out Sukarno, weakened Nasser, and so forth. It's then that fundamentalism started to take over those states, and the impact of that was not just political, it was also cultural. It reflected in the curricula, in the educational system. And so, I think we are in a period of regression. We are seeing a retreat towards a kind of a primitivism, where we are demanding that we want to go back into the past, into some imagined variety of it. But this doesn't have to be a permanent state. If we were better before, we can be better again.
Yes. Professor, thank you for the fascinating talk. But I think this entire issue of Islam and science also has a broader political dimension as well. In fact, arguing that imperialism took also a corner from Indonesia and Mustafid from Iran and Jamal Abdul Nasser from Egypt. It basically, whether one, really approves of this argument, it contributes to this conspiracy mindset which is all pervasive in the Muslim world. And that is where my, question points to. The only period in Muslim history or Islamic history, whatever you want to call it, is the golden age of Muslims, and which, spans a number of centuries. And that may be a reference point for Muslims, anybody who wants to, make a difference in the 20th century. But then again, I think the central question is, what led to the rise of Muslims in the 9th or 8th century? And what actually contributed to their fall? Now, how should we answer these two questions? If we are able to answer these two questions, then we can argue that, these were the factors which led to our rise, and these were the factors which led to our fall. And the second aspect is very important because from there begins the debate where you have the fundamentalists always trying to make a point that there is a grand conspiracy against us, whether it was from the Mongols in that century who burned the libraries in Baghdad, or the Christian Crusaders, and in the post-colonial times, the Americans and the Westerners, or the Israelis, or the combine of the West and the Israeli state. So this, conspiracy mindset and the internal reasoning which is pointed out by those who say that there is a conspiracy is that perhaps there is a decline of morality as it is articulated by religion. So I think, would you be able to tell us as to what was the principal factor that made Muslims be, at the apex of modernity